Good morning, rise and shine to the morning momentum, your daily dose of a comprehensive rundown of the top stories making the headlines. Today, being the Thursday, 16th of May, let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. We start with the Standard this morning. Be ready for higher taxes yearly, President Ruto says. Now, Kenya should brace themselves for continued increase in levies over Ruto's presidency after he revealed that his ultimate aim is to push the country's tax to GDP ratio from 14 to 22%, despite a pushback by taxpayers who protest at the move and complain that their dues are never put to good use. More of that story is beefed up for you on page 4. Now, we also have some figures highlighted here on the front page. 3.91 trillion shillings is Kenya's budget for 2024-2025 financial year, a 273 billion reduction from 4.19 trillion that the government had earlier planned to spend. Projected total revenue for the 2024-2025 financial year, including appropriations in aid, stands at 3.4 trillion shillings, and expected budget deficit that will be bridged through borrowing from both local and international lenders is at 41.7 billion shillings. Now, 22% is the ultimate tax to gross domestic product ratio that President Ruto hopes to achieve by the time of leaving office, up from the current 14%. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 4. Now, special report tells of broken hearts as hype projects stall. Launch plagues, abandoned equipment and materials litter construction sites and are at the mercy of scrap metal thieves after the president's plan to transform counties appeared to veer off track with billions of shillings already pumped in. More of that story is beefed up for you on page 6. On page 9, school feeding shocker for 2.6 million in funding cuts. That is a story we'll catch up with inside the Standard this morning. Also on page 8, national news. Confusion in UDA as CS Kuria enters the Limuru 3 fray. Now, let's take a look at page 2. Questions as DP asks for millions to renovate office and buy medals. Now, Gachagua office wants 1.12 billion shillings to repair current residence and Harambee Annex. Office says request also covers increased functions of the deputy president's spouse. In numbers, 800 million shillings for confidential expenditure, 660 million shillings to renovate DP's official residence in Karen, 460.4 million shillings for the Harambee Annex house, 200 million shillings to buy new vehicles, 250 million shillings for alcohol, drugs and substance abuse program, and lastly 250 million shillings to buy medals and insignia. More of that story is on page 2. On page 3, rescue efforts underway after 3 buried alive in landslide. Search teams battle against time to retrieve the victims. Family hopes for miracle as governor provides a rescue equipment. More of that story is augmented for you on page 3 of the Standard this morning. On page 4, Ruto promises to increase taxes as Azimio tells MPs to vote down bill. Now, President has said Kenya is lagging behind in taxing its citizens and pledged increased levies. Now, Kalonzo Musyoka said the rise is inhumane as it will push up the cost of living, which is already too high. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 4. At a glance, 3.91 trillion shillings is Kenya's budget for 2024-2025 financial year, and that is a reduction from the previous 273 billion shillings from the planned 4.19 trillion shillings due to revenue collection shortfalls. So the budget has been scaled down by 273 billion shillings. Now, 3.4 trillion shillings is the amount projected total revenue, including ordinary revenue and ministerial appropriations in aid for the 2024-2025 financial year. Now, 41.7 billion shillings is the expected budget deficit of 541.7 billion shillings, which will be bridged through borrowing both locally and from foreign lenders. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 4 of the Standard this morning. On page 5, President's state visit to US will have huge impact, says Whitman. Now, the meetings and interactions will be formal, and the president will first spend 2 days in Atlanta, Georgia. Those are sentiments by Meg Whitman, the U.S. ambassador to Kenya. Let's take a look at page 6. Tales of broken hearts as Kenya Kwanza's hype projects stall. Now, President William Ruto promised to revive and launch fresh projects countrywide. Works at most of the undertakings have stopped, with contractors having left. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 6. Some of the stalled projects include 1 billion fisheries aquaculture service and trading center of excellence at Kabonyo Kanyagwalin, Kisumu. Now, 89 kilometers Nanyuki Rumuruti Road. Also, we have the last mile water connectivity project at Kegonga in Kuria East Sub-County, among many others. We also have the handshake projects, which includes Mamboleo Miwani Road. There is the 34 billion Itare Dam. There's also Chemusu water supply project, among many more, which are highlighted for you on page 6. On page 7 of the Standard this morning, push to bar counties from hiring law firms. Activists argued counties were incurring billions of shillings in legal fees. No law bars counties from engaging private lawyers, leading to misuse of funds. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 7 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 8. Limuru 3 meeting sows confusion in Kenya Kwanza administration. The meeting will focus on controversial one man, one vote, 1 shilling revenue allocation formula. Summit expected to follow path of previous meetings. Now, Rigathi Gachagua, who is the deputy president, his sentiments are, and I quote, "Those who intend to plan for meeting should come and talk to me because I'm the senior most political leader in this region." Moses Kuria's sentiments, and I quote, "We are a government and we can implement one man, one vote, 1 shilling by Friday if we are serious." Martha Karua also said, and I quote, "We are marginalized even in the distribution of resources, and this also means access to health is being marginalized, therefore causing people ill health and death." You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 8. On page 9, shock for learners as Treasury withdraws school feeding funds. Now, the program started in 1980 and was in response to a drought that affected 80% of Kenyans. It reaches at least 2.6 million students across 8,185 schools nationwide. Now, we want to catch up with more of those insights again on page 9 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 10. Inside Ruto doctors' agreement to rescue an ailing health sector. The current basic agreement repayment term will be scaled down from 5 years to just 2 years. Government committed to reduce payment period for salary arrears owed to healthcare workers. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 10 of the Standard this morning as well. Now, on page 12, Athi River, town where residents live next door to polluting farms. Locals concerned about deadly emissions in the area. Some factories are working to reduce smoke toxicity. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 12. On page 13, new evidence suggests Ruto still has interest in Huduma number. Last year, President William Ruto said taxpayers lost 15 billion shillings in the project. The president has started his own pet project dubbed Maisha Number. That is a top story making the headlines on page 13. Let us now shift gears and take a look at the expert opinion this morning. It's corruption that is stealing millions of young people's jobs. These are sentiments of Elias Mokua. Now, unemployment in Kenya is a persistent issue, and it is disheartening to note that much of it has been artificially generated and sustained over the years. You want to catch up with more of those insights of Beyond Words on page 14 under the expert opinion. On page 15, the big question, do you support plan to raise tax on bread and M-Pesa? Now, Francis Ndolo, a policy analyst, says yes, that's the best way for state to raise money. On the contrary, Philip Kajimba, Migori politician, says no, state hurting over taxed hustlers. Now, that is also a top story inside the Standard this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at the business news. Banks warn VAT on transactions could damage Kenya's economy. Finance bill proposes to remove exemptions on transactions and also increase excise duty. Executives say move will make financial services more expensive and Kenya uncompetitive. Now, finance bill 100 taxes. If a bank charges a customer 100 shillings for money transfer, the bill proposes an additional 39.2 shillings to be paid by the customer to cater for taxes. Now, briefing investment. CMA gives nod to new unit trust. The Capital Markets Authority has approved the registration of a new collective investment scheme. In Nyeri, Old Mutual supports flood victims. Nyeri Governor Mutahi Kahiga with Old Mutual CEO Arthur Oginga. Old Mutual Group and its subsidiary Faulu Microfinance Bank have given support targeting 500 families affected by floods in Nyeri. Also in matters economy, EU cuts 2024 inflation forecast. The EU has predicted Eurozone inflation to fall faster in 2024, but warned the area's economy still faced risks from geopolitical tensions, including war in Ukraine and Gaza. More of those insights on page 18, Business News. Now, shipping and logistics will not charge ships more for waste. That is Kenya Maritime Authority. 27,000 shillings is the amount KPA wanted to collect from ships. That is a top story you want to catch up with on page 20 and page 21 of the Standard this morning. Let us take a look at the international scene. How illicit timber trade with China is fueling Mozambique insurgency. Tropical hardwoods, including rosewood, are sold illegally, which funds conflict in the southern African nation. A report by the Environmental Investigation Agency shows the illicit trade is also used to recruit fighters. More of that is beefed up for you on page 22. Now, in Kipirizi, living in fear in relentless battle for East DR Congo. Innocent Kasereka sits in a rundown hospital in war-torn east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, his neck bandaged where he was brutally slashed with a knife. The 30-year-old recounts how he was caught in the middle of the conflict raging between rebels of the M23. That is a top story you want to catch up with on page 23. Of the Standard this morning. In Kigali, Rwanda opposition figure barred from election race. Now, a Rwandan court on Tuesday rejected an appeal by a prominent opposition figure to have his previous convictions removed, disqualifying him from challenging President Paul Kagame in July elections. More of those insights are briefed up for you on page 23. Now, with that, it's time to take a look at the sports news, but also for the real estate enthusiasts. You have your article beefed up for you inside the Standard as well. Now, again, it is about finance bill proposes how to sell affordable housing units. You will catch up with more of those insights on the real estate article. Let us take a look at sports news inside the Standard this morning. And we start with the Paris Olympics. Paris Olympics economic impact estimated at almost 1.5 trillion shillings. Now, this is according to a research by the Finance-Based Center for Law and Economics of Sport. The governor of the French Central Bank, Francois Villeroy de Galhau, feels the biggest impact from the games would be psychological rather than economic. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 37. NBA, Knicks bounce back in style to crush Pacers. Jalen Brunson was back to his best on Tuesday as the New York Knicks dominated the Indiana Pacers 121-91 to take a 3-2 lead in their Eastern Conference semi-final Game 5. You want to catch up with more of that also on page 37. On page 38 of the Standard this morning, Kenyan-born Thimangu kicks his way to seventh degree black belt. He is the first athlete born in Kenya to achieve the coveted Taekwondo feat. He owns a Taekwondo school in St. Louis, US, where he is also a master instructor. That is a top story on page 38. Let's take a look at page 39. Omune ends police unbeaten run to hand Gor Mahia title advantage. AFC Leopards halted Kenya police unbeaten run in Dandora yesterday. Nzoia Sugar staring at relegation after losing to Homeboys. That's a top story on page 39. On the cover page of the Standard this morning, Guardiola says Manchester City do feel the tension of title race. Champions beat Tottenham to move ahead of Arsenal in EPL table. City will win a fourth consecutive title on Sunday with victory over West Ham. That is a top story on page 40. In English Premier League also, Postecoglou misread fans' desperation to stop Arsenal. Tottenham boss Ange Postecoglou said the foundation has built at the club are fragile after many fans took glee in their 2-0 defeat to Manchester City, which could deny North London rivals Arsenal the Premier League title. Now, with that story of English Premier League, we take a quick break and then we come back with the top stories on the Daily Nation this morning. Don't go away, the best is yet to come. See you on the other side of this broadcast. Welcome back to the Morning Momentum. If you're just joining us, you are still rolling with the host with the most. Alfonsoh Ouma is my name. Remember to use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. Let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines on the Daily Nation this morning. Budget, no money for school feeding. Now, Ministry of Education has appealed to MPs to reinstate funding for program. Millions of learners from poor families in some 26 counties risk dropping out of school starting July after the Kenya Kwanza government, which promised to double beneficiaries of the free meals scheme, withdrew funding for the program that has helped boost enrollment and class attendance. That is a top story beefed up for you on page 6 and page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, Kipchoge dragged into court fight over matrimonial land. That's a top story on page 3. Renowned athlete Eliud Kipchoge has been dragged into a legal battle over the ownership of a multi-million shilling property, pitting Joyce Kimosop Komen against her husband, former 5,000 meters world champion Daniel Komen. Now, also, in as much as there is no money for school feeding, the Daily Nation says, but Gachagwa's office gets 2.6 billion shillings for renovation and cars. Now, members of the National Assembly have raised questions over the proposed allocation of some 2.6 billion shillings to office of the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua in the next financial year to renovate the DP's Harambee Annex office and current residence. Among the figures queried by the Committee on Administration and Internal Security are 460 million shillings marked for the refurbishment of Harambee Annex and another 660 million shillings for the renovation of his residence. That's the top story on page 7. On the cover page, help end salary protests by JSS teachers. Kupet asks MPs. Also on international news, poll shows Biden and Trump neck and neck ahead of November US elections. Let's get up close and candid with the Daily Nation and take a look at page 2. Kenyan in Saudi Arabia seeks help to come back home. Woman's child and father in Kenya also need money for treatment. Margaret says he's unable to get medical care since she does not have her papers. She says, and I quote, "I have become a burden to people. I have tried a number of hospitals in vain. My leg needs urgent medical attention." That's a top story on page 2. On page 3, Eliud Kipchoge dragged into fight over matrimonial land. Woman wants the court to declare the land sale a nullity for trampling on her rights over matrimonial property. Comen's wife claims that he sold the family's land without involving her in the transaction. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 3 of the Daily Nation. On page 4, Gachagwa's one-man, one-shilling push sparks a storm. Now, division of revenue. Elected Taita Taveta leaders join the fray and demand that Tsavo National Park be devolved. Senator Mungatana criticizes DP, says formula will further deprive marginalized communities. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 4 of the Daily Nation. On page 5, Kibaki era youth funds budget halved. Now, the Affirmative Action Fund was created to support youth-owned enterprises to access low-cost loans, and these Youth Enterprise Development Fund monies, which are under the MSME's department, have been moved to the Youth Affairs and Creative Economy. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 6. Millions to miss class as school feeding funds dry up in budget. Now, the Ministry of Education has now appealed to the National Assembly to reinstate funding for the program run jointly by the national and county governments. Whereas the Kenya Kwanza government had promised to double beneficiaries, no money has been allocated in the next financial year for the program that keeps many poor children in school. That's a top story making the headlines on page 6 and page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also on page 7, queries over 2.6 billion shillings allocation to Gashagua's office. Members of the National Assembly have raised questions over the proposed allocation of some 2.6 billion shillings to the office of the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua in the next financial year. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 7. Let's take a look at page 8. KWS on the spot over skewed recruitment. The National Assembly Committee has raised fears that the recruitment process will disenfranchise other Kenyans. Dominance of a few ethnic groups within the rank and file raised questions during the parliamentary committee hearing. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 8. Let's take a look at page 10. Murkomen, 30 billion shillings needed to repair roads damaged by floods. Floods across the country have caused heavy damage to infrastructure. Agriculture CS tells senators state does not have funds to compensate farmers affected by the floods. Now, in Kajiado County, MP asks county to implement law on water harvesting. Kajiado North MP Onesmus Ngogoyo wants the Kajiado County government to implement the rainwater harvesting law to tap the resource during the rainy seasons. That's a top story making the headlines on page 10. Now let's move on swiftly and take a look at the expert opinion this morning on the Daily Nation. Now, let Parliament resolve county funds raw now. Counties are staring at a major cash crunch as a result of a deadlock between the National Assembly and the Senate over the allocation of funds. Should the two houses of Parliament fail to reach a deal, county operations could grind to a halt. Also, floods a serious threat to our food security. These are sentiments by Judian Wanjiku. Enhance meteorological focusing capabilities and disseminate timely warnings to at-risk communities. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 14. Let's take a look at county news. We start with Kisumu County. Russia upgrade to level 6 promises improved services. The move will unlock more funding from state to development partners. The Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Teaching and Referral Hospital is now a level 6 facility. In Nakuru County, state given 2 weeks to table its report on the floods. The High Court in Nakuru has granted the government a 14-day extension of a deadline to file a report on its readiness to deal with flooding. The ruling was in response to a case filed by the Law Society of Kenya. On May 3rd, Justice Samuel Mohochi had directed the Interior Ministry to prepare the present a contingency plan for flood prevention, control, and disaster response systems. That is in Nakuru County. Briefly, in Nairobi County, man hurt as a stone falls from building. A 40-year-old man is fighting for his life in a city hospital after he was injured by a falling stone from a construction site while he was resting inside his house in Mukuru Hazina. In Homa Bay County, elders concerned by political rows. The Luo Council of Elders has called upon politicians in Nyanza to tone down their rhetoric amid an outbreak of deadly violence in the recent past. Describing the trend as worrying, Council member Mzee Nyandiko Ongadi cited last week's incident in Migori County, where mourners were injured after chaos broke out at a funeral, as well as the killing of a bouncer in Homa Bay. Let's take a look at Machakos County. EACC to probe officials for bursary loan fraud. Governor says car loan and mortgage fund reforms underway. Auditor General's report flags bursary checks whose amounts were altered. You want to catch up with more of those insights on county news on page 17 and 18 of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, Again, for the real estate enthusiasts, the Daily Nation today features real estate terms and their meanings. For those who want to venture into real estate, you can catch up with that article on page 20 and page 21 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 23. Biden, Trump running neck and neck in polls. It's all about the White House race. Now, registered voters focus on handling of the war in Gaza, age and legal troubles. Incumbent president and Republican rival are tied ahead of the November 5th U.S. election. More of those insights are beefed up for you on page 23. Also on page 23, Gambian ex-minister gets 20-year sentence in Switzerland. A Swiss court on Wednesday convicted a former government minister from Gambia of crimes against humanity under ex-dictator Yahya Jammeh and jailed him for 20 years in a historic verdict using universal jurisdiction in Europe. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 23. Now, with that story of Gambia, let's shift gears and take a look at business news on the Daily Nation this morning. Plan to have CBK control costs in higher purchase. Oversight. Now, BRS to continue issuing business licenses. Move comes after complaints of exploitation, especially in the border sector. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 24. Briefly, in banking, SBM Bank taps for 471 million shillings capital from parent. Mauritius SBM Holdings last year made a 471 million shillings capital injection in SBM Bank, Kenya. Now, in matters transport, Isuzu in 200 million shillings lorries sale to bakery company. Isuzu East Africa has sold 40 lorries to bakery firm Desra Ventures in transaction valued at an estimated 200 million shillings. Also in matters partnership, China's Mango TV Inc.'s deal with Kenyan media. Mango Television of China on Tuesday signed a memorandum of understanding with Chinese telecoms firm Huawei and Kenyan media houses. Huawei is partnering with media houses including Nation Media Group. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 24. Let's now shift gears and take a look at the sports news inside the Daily Nation this morning. Let us start with volleyball. Clubs eye playoff slots. Now, final leg of the National League will run from today till Sunday in Nairobi. Organizers have increased the playoff slots to 8 to make league more competitive. On page 33, KVF stock brass a big letdown to the brand that is Malkia Strikers. The local volleyball fraternity has been up in arms since Sunday, says Samuel Gasharira. Now, let's move on and take a look at page 34, talk about the Kenyan Premier League. Top 3 not on Leopards' mind, says Coach Trucha. Leaders go away to KCB at SportsPesa Arena in Murang'a today. Ingwe and Police 18th March unbeaten run to leapfrog from 6th to 4th on the league table. In matters athletics, injury delays Kipyegon's season start until June. World and Olympics 1500 meters champion Faith Kipyegon has finally broken silence on her whereabouts. Kipyegon, who is also the world 5000 meters champion, yesterday disclosed that a muscle injury suffered a few weeks ago had interrupted her training for the season. On page 35, easy guys. Good job not done. That is all about the English Premier League. Exciting season comes to an end on Sunday. 2 points separate the top 2. Manchester City manager Guardiola says his players know it will be tough on Sunday despite lying top of the table. Let's take a look at the cover page of the Daily Nation. Kuppet wants MPs to help end protests. Now, Missouri urges Treasury to get resources for hiring the teachers on permanent and pensionable terms. Junior secondary school tutors say they'll obey court orders by remaining home. In numbers, 15,000 is the amount of money in shillings a primary school intern teacher gets as a stipend in a month. A JSS teacher on contract is given 20,000 shillings by the Teachers Service Commission. Now, with that story of the Kupet, we come to an end of today's broadcast of the Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for staying with Younib TV and especially the Morning Momentum. You are great people. Together, we shall make this happen. By extension, I also want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all those who made this broadcast a success. The Chief Controller, Anifa, Kavira. I have been your host, Alfonsoh Ouma. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, do have